Hi, it's me, Annie, again for this next in the series of videos for the Leeds Beckett Confidence Development Programme. So today we're going to be looking at the topic of personal effectiveness and time management. So the topics we're going to cover today include a brief look at kind of personality preferences and how these affect our approach to managing time. We're going to have a look into the Eisenhower matrix, it's also known as the urgent important matrix, which is a really useful tool that you can use when you're thinking about your own time management and planning in your daily lives, at university and in the workplace. And thinking about those personality preferences and that Eisenhower matrix, hopefully you're going to gain an insight into your own time management preferences and think about how you can utilise some new time management techniques and ideas based on what you're doing already and what areas you'd like to improve. And we're going to finish off with some top tips and tactics to prioritise and really help you become more efficient and productive with your use of time. In effect, become less busy. So when we're thinking about personality preferences today, we're going to be using a small section of the MBTI profiling tool. So that's the Myers-Briggs type indicators, which you may have come across before. And this is a tool that's used to help individuals and sometimes teams understand their thinking and working preferences. This might be to help allocate tasks appropriately within a team, where one employee might derive more enjoyment than another, or help you work out which direction or which roles you might like to go forward and take on and where you might fit best. Like any profiling tool, naturally it has its criticisms, and many people don't particularly like being reduced to 4 letters. I always think I slightly fall between the gaps because I sit between lots of the different letters. But it can be really helpful in developing your self-awareness around what situations you might thrive in and what you might find stressful. We'll talk again in the session on decision making, on facing complexity with confidence about holiday planning. Some people might have a spreadsheet of potential accommodations ranked by stars, proximity to town centre, facilities, parking, cost, all those kind of things. Other people might get a flight, turn up at their chosen destination and see where looks nice on arrival. So it's a way of thinking about what kind of personality we use when we're thinking about managing our time and making decisions. So if we think again about those two options there of holiday planners and kind of more intuitive holiday makers. Judges, the J, tends to be more organised and prepared. They like to make and stick to plans and are more comfortable if they're following rules. Those are the people who have likely got a detailed plan in place and they like to stick to it. The P people, perceivers on the other end, prefer to keep their options open. They like to be able to act spontaneously and like to be flexible with plan making. So they're generally better when things don't go to plan, or if new information or new bits of sort of events come into play and mean they have to change their plans. So there is no wrong or right answer, and it's our personalities. It's something that we all do differently. And another way to think about this kind of spectrum or continuum, because it is a spectrum, you're not necessarily entirely a judge or entirely perceiver. You might be different based on the scenario, or inside work or outside of work, or change over your lifetime, or just sit somewhere in the middle. But another way to think about this continuum is how you might set your alarm clock in the morning. So judges tend to place a high value on being on time. We set alarms and reminders and check the clock when a deadline is coming up. And are spectacularly good at estimating how long something will take. They tend not to leave themselves just 10 minutes to complete a 30-minute commute, no matter how optimistic they are about the traffic. In fact, they're more likely to leave 20 minutes earlier just in case. So some of us might even do, some people might even do a dry run of an important journey, like getting to an interview, just to make sure that they show up on time. Perceivers, on the other hand, take a much more flexible approach to punctuality, meaning they're often late or just on time. And unlike judges who don't really like to approximate or don't particularly like the unexpected, hence focusing on the clock watching, perceivers are constantly taking in new information around what's happening around them, processing and responding to it in real time. They might not be on time if nothing interesting is happening, but if it's likely that they'll lose themselves to more exciting or important pursuits. So I often find in kind of my own personal life, in outside of work, I'm probably more naturally a perceiver, but I've taught myself some of the judges' habits and skills, like setting reminders, like using my calendar and clock watching to help me navigate day-to-day life as in the workplace. So you may be like me, you may be more one or the other, but you've learned skills to help you move further into the middle and handle different types of situations. So we're going to now have a think about task management. So what I want you to think about is the difference between what is urgent and what is important. What I would say first is this quote from Eisenhower. What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. So they are different things, and it can be helpful to think about that difference and use that to help us plan and prioritise and work out how to manage our tasks. So I'd say that urgent requires immediate attention. It tends to put us in a reactive mode, marked generally by kind of defensive, negative, perhaps hurried or narrowly focused mindset. Something that's important, however, contributes to our long-term mission. We're back to those values and those goals again. And sometimes important tasks can be urgent, but they're typically not. When we focus on important activities, we operate in a responsive mode, which can help us to remain calm and open to new opportunities. We often, and it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that what is urgent is also important, but it's often not the case. And the consequence of that priority blindness is that we can suffer from burnout, unable to move on or focus on the right tasks. So based on that quote from Eisenhower, this matrix was developed, the Eisenhower matrix, or the urgent important matrix, and it's split into 4 boxes. So we've got urgent important at the top there, not urgent but important. Then at the bottom we've got urgent but not important, and then the not important and not urgent. So the urgent important tasks in that top corner there, these are the tasks that require our immediate attention and help us meet our long-term goals and missions. So these might be sort of emergencies, problems, crises, sort of responding to a new job offer, for example, a tax deadline, your car breaking down, perhaps an accident, a partner in A&E. And with a bit more planning, many of these tasks can be made more efficient or eliminated. But other times they can't. But if we think for the tax return example, rather than leaving that to the night before, if you do it in advance, it stops being urgent and you move it into that not urgent box. And similarly, if you service your car regularly, you're able to move that kind of car breakdown into a not important because it's something that you've regularly taken care of. You can't eliminate them completely, but we can reduce them if we spend more time in that important but not urgent box. So moving over to the not urgent but important box, these things don't have a pressing deadline, but they will help you to achieve your goals and your mission. So these might be strengthening important relationships, forward planning, personal development, which is really easy to leave behind when we're constantly doing tasks for other people. So in terms of work, it might be making calls with customers, project planning, or it could be something like a date night, which is really important to invest in, but not necessarily urgent. We should aim, though, to spend most of our time in this area, but we often don't, as we are often not so aware of what's important to us and have a present bias or an urgency addiction, causing us to focus on what is most pressing at the moment. And it can be hard to get motivated when there isn't a pressing deadline. So we keep putting it off, saying, I'll do that next week or next month. But departing on this does take power and self-discipline, but it can be really helpful in the long run too. So if we move over into the third box, urgent but not important, these are the activities that require our attention now, but don't help us to achieve our goals. They're often interruptions from other people, helping other people to meet their goals or fulfill their priorities. For example, an unexpected phone call, endless emails coming through, work that you've been asked to do as a favour. And we tend to spend a lot of our time in this quadrant thinking that we're in quadrant 1, which is the urgent and important. We do it to help out. We often get a sense of satisfaction from completing something quickly and being able to tick it off our list. But while these tasks might be urgent to others, they're not necessarily urgent to you. These tasks aren't bad, and sometimes there can be benefits to doing them, but they need to be balanced with the not urgent and important stuff that you want to spend most of your time in. Otherwise, you won't be able to make progress on your own goals and may end up feeling personal frustration and resentment. And finally, there is the not urgent, not important box, otherwise known as faffing or procrastination. Definitely, I think all of us have experienced this one. These things don't meet our goals, and they're primarily for distractions. So think about scrolling social media endlessly, some meetings, watching TV, kind of a program that you're not particularly interested in, isn't particularly taking your fancy, but you've just kind of put the TV on. And have any of you been doing any of these things and had that realization that you're never going to get the time that you've just spent back? And often the more we're stressed by spending our time in other quadrants, we escape to this one for relief. But this can ultimately make the situation worse, as time would probably be better spent in another quadrant, forward planning. So you can you can try and sort of rid yourself of these not urgent and not important tasks, but that's probably not realistic. So instead, perhaps limit your time and try and minimise the amount of time you spend in these areas. So looking back to the screen now, we've got these different quadrants and some examples of them, and the kind of summary of what you should aim to do with this area. So you want to focus in this box, which is the not urgent but important one, thinking about your personal development and kind of strategic planning. You want to minimise that not important and not urgent scrolling, gossiping, procrastination kind of things. Avoid, if you can, some of that urgent but not important work, phone calls, some meetings, delegated work, and manage these things that are urgent and important by trying to move them into the focus box by thinking about them earlier before they become urgent in themselves. So by doing these things, you can start to think about managing your workload and prioritising your tasks. And you might want to think about making a list of the activities you do in a day or a week and working out in which of these boxes they fit, and thinking how you might want to change that. What actions can you take to manage, focus, avoid or minimise those tasks, depending on where they fall in the urgent, important matrix. Another way, particularly of thinking about those tasks that are not urgent and not important, those ones that we want to minimise, is as time thieves. So I'm sure you, like many of us, often feel like we're experiencing a serious lack of time. We feel like time is kind of slipping through our fingers, leaving us with too little accomplished, and plans not quite coming through. So it's worthwhile, as I said, to spend some time running through your routine to see what the time bandits are that are robbing you of those precious hours. So time thieves or time bandits are also known as distractions that can rob us of our time, such as an email, a talkative colleague or peer, a lengthy phone call, or slow equipment. If your Wi-Fi is not working, that's going to rob you of lots of time. You could be doing other things. So these sort of interruptions and distractions can take our attention away from the more strategic or creative work in that important but not urgent box. So it's worth having a think about what your biggest time thieves are, and thinking about how you can improve your schedule to remove some of these things or move some of these things around. So some of the most common office distractions, thinking about it from a workplace perspective, are on the screen now, and these are taken from an HR Grapevine survey in 2018. So it actually might look slightly different, particularly as lots of us are working online, attending lectures online. Something like poor Wi-Fi connection, or is going to be much higher up there than it was. It wasn't there on this list itself. So some of these things, talking with colleagues, taking breaks, they are important. We do need to do them. We do need to fit them into our lives. But they can also be distractions, checking our phone, constant emails, scrolling social media. All these things can take time out of what we want to be doing. Some of them have their place, but how do we balance all the tasks we had to fit in? So we're thinking about your biggest time thieves and how you might want to limit or minimise the time spent on those activities. Another concept that you can use to think about managing your time better is the circle of concern. So in this circle, the first circle you've got there, concern, are all of the things that are out of our control. They might concern us, they might be something that we're interested in, or is relevant to our daily lives, something like the weather or the economy or other people's opinions, but they aren't things that we have any control over. Influence, on the other side, are all the things that you can control. So that might be your attitude, your skills, what you read, how you spend your free time, who you spend your time with. And you can be either reactive or proactive. So those that are reactive spend a lot of time complaining about those things that are out of their control in that circle of concern. So that might be the environment, and forces outside their control. It might mean that those things are affecting their performance and their mood because they're focusing unduly on the things that they can't control. And additionally, that means they don't have the time to act on the things they can control. Proactive people, on the other hand, realise that their decisions determine their life, not their conditions. So proactive people don't complain about the things they cannot control, and they take action to improve the things that they can control. They understand that they might not have complete control over everything, but they can control how they respond to a certain situation. So if you've got a lecturer you don't think is very good, reactive people might complain about that, blame the teacher for their bad results and give up. But a proactive person looks at what they can do to improve that situation. They might do extra study, they might talk to a different lecturer, they might work with their friends to sort of group study to help themselves improve that situation, find the things they can influence and spend their time on them rather than complaining about the things outside of their control. So to take control of your time thieves is to adopt a proactive focus, shift from the mindset that my working is shaping me to I'm taking ownership of shaping my work. And if you don't feel that you can resolve something, are there other places you can turn? Can you reframe the question, ask somebody else to help you with it, or look at a different solution, a more creative solution to that problem? And if you can't control it, in the words of Elsa from Frozen, let it go. Park that. It's not something you can control, and therefore not something that you should be spending your time on and concerning yourself with. But on the note of kind of asking for help, when we start our careers, we often get recognised for working longer, faster, harder than our peers. However, as we move forward in our career, tasks often get more complicated. This is where we need to have a mindset shift from how can I get this done? How can I get this done? To how can this be done? And we need to realise that we need to collaborate and work with others rather than compete against them. If you're displaying a win-lose attitude, you don't really add value to what you're doing or the organisation or yourself. Instead, we need to appreciate the value that other people bring. They've all got different perspectives, experiences, opinions, and we'll talk about this much more in the session on collaboration and cultural intelligence. But what this means is that we'll be able to create something much greater than ourselves. It will also really help us to think about how we handle those circles of concern and influence, and how we move things from something we may not be able to control on our own to something we can influence with the help of our friends. So as Paul Macready, the aeronautical engineer who won the first Creamer Prize, said, if your shovel isn't big enough, get some friends to help, and it will make lots of things a lot easier. So for the final section of this session, I want to share with you my top time management tips. And I've got 5 of these tips today, followed by a story to finish us off. So tip 1, sounds simple, put a plan in place. You may have heard the phrase, break the boulder down or eat the elephant one bite at a time. But what this means is to break down a large task into smaller, more manageable chunks, like climbing a mountain. You know, you'll have goals and have milestones that you work on, rather than trying to do it all at once. You know, there's planning that goes into it. There's the different resources you need to bring with you, other people you're working with. But all goals and projects are made up of smaller parts that need to be accomplished in order to achieve the goal or complete the project. And when we're facing a really big goal or project, it can feel overwhelming, like trying to eat a whole elephant. It's big and tough and it feels impossible. So to get a plan in place, you need to break it down into manageable milestones and tasks and work backwards from the end date. And why is this beneficial? It helps us to identify what needs to be completed by when. For instance, So this will really help you to keep motivated as you can see what you've achieved to date, and helps you to feel a sense of achievement as you tick off those milestones as you work towards your bigger goal. The second tip is about prioritization, and this takes us back to the Eisenhower urgent important matrix. So if you don't have a plan, instead of focusing on what needs to be done, you can wander aimlessly taking care of more trivial matters. So using this tool, the urgent important matrix, to help you decide what you should be doing is really helpful. And we've got a video that you can look up in the resources to help explain this in a little bit more detail to you. It's about being in the proactive sphere rather than the reactive, so that you're able to think about and focus on your long-term mission, and break the cycle of firefighting or urgency addiction to help us focus on the activities that will help us to achieve our goals instead. Thirdly, this is another video that we'll share with you in the resources, but it's about starting with the most important tasks, the most important things. And for us to be able to effectively prioritise our life, we must be able to recognise what is and isn't important. If, when you're finding that you've got lots of activities in the urgent important box, ask yourself, are they really important or are they just urgent? And when a new task comes in, you can review it against your other activities. Where does this sit among them? What is its priority? What needs to be done first and why? Another question to ask yourself might be, what is the consequence if this doesn't happen now? Can I delay it until there's more time, or can I ask somebody else to help us do it? Because by taking on new tasks, that's going to have a knock-on effect of our original list. And we want to start with those important tasks, those big, large chunks that take up lots of our time, because we can then fit the smaller, necessary or nice to have tasks around them. And that's what this video demonstrates. If you need to, can you align your tasks with other tasks, move them around, or even stop or delay something else to make space for those bigger, important activities? Time blocking is my tip number 4. It's been proven to be a highly effective way to focus and get things done. I live by this, blocking out time in my diary to focus on key activities, It's helpful because it stops colleagues booking meetings at a time when I know I need to be working on something else. But another way to approach it is switching everything else off so that you can focus on this activity, avoid distractions, switch off my phone, turn off my email notifications, and get it done in the time allowed. I used to have a long commute in the afternoon. During working hours, I would take an important project that I needed to work on offline, and I knew that I couldn't be distracted because the signal was so poor on the train that meant that I wouldn't be receiving phone calls or emails that I would have done otherwise. So it forced me to focus for that period of that train journey on that particular important activity that I knew I needed to focus on. And finally, tip 5. This is a nice simple one. Eat your frogs for breakfast. What do I mean by this? Do the tasks you really don't want to do at the start of the day. Get them out of the way rather than having them hanging over you all day. Another tip from my experience, I used to make my regret calls to candidates who hadn't been successful for a job before I allowed myself to make the job offers. I did the unpleasant bit first, the bit I didn't really like doing, so that I could look forward to the nice task of telling people that they'd got a job. And we'll wrap up this session with a bit of a story about the theory of marginal gains. So I don't know if any of you are cycling fans, but in 110 years, no British cyclists had ever won the Tour de France, one of the biggest competitions in cycling. So since 1908, only one gold medal had been won in the Olympics by a British cyclist. So the team looked at every detail of what they did, the weight of the bicycle, the diet of their cyclists. They gave hand sanitizer to everybody that came in contact with the team, which may sound commonplace now, but wasn't then, in order to reduce the illnesses that those cyclists picked up. They even delivered bespoke mattresses and pillows to the hotel for each rider, so that they were having a better night's sleep than their competitors in the hotel room next to them. They hired medical professionals to teach them how to most effectively wash their hands. Again, something we all do now, but again, wasn't so common at the time. And painted the inside of the vans that they were using in white so that dust would more easily show up, which could then be cleaned so that it didn't impact the fine mechanics of the bikes. So in the 10-year period between 2007 and 2017, when they were focusing on all these things, British cyclists came to win from really, really little, you remember, to 178 World Championships and 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals, plus 5 Tour de France victories, with Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome becoming household names. So that's a massive increase from, as I said, no British cyclists winning the Tour de France and 1 gold medal in the Olympics. To 178 World Championships, 66 Olympic and Paralympic medals, and 5 Tour de France victories. So this result, is widely regarded as the most successful run in cycling history. And it wasn't made by doing anything hugely drastic. It was made by an accumulation of small changes, a slight tweak to the weight of the bike, some small measures to improve the health of the cyclists and the night's sleep that they got, and all these things, just these small changes, one after the other, meant that it had a really significant impact. So I want you to think about your own time management and personal effectiveness in the same way. Just changing 1%, that little 1%, added together over a period of time, 1%, 1%, 1% can have a huge effect, a huge increase. So when you're thinking about going away from this video and what you want to do differently, maintaining that momentum, I want you to think about 1 to 3 things that you are going to take away and do differently. So this might be something you've learnt about your own time management preferences, and acting more mindfully and using your choice to decide how you're going to act. It might be taking one of these tips or ideas that I've spoken about, or implementing the urgent important matrix in your daily time management. But whatever it is, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by it. You don't have to do everything I've said today. By picking 1 to 3 things and starting this week to implement them, you can start to make changes, you can start to improve, maintain that momentum in order to build confidence and gain confidence in your own personal effectiveness and time management skills. Thanks very much for watching. See you again soon. Bye.